While Mongol general Subutai Ba'atar is often described as undefeated and unstoppable, Subutai's career did see defeats, some by the collapsing Jin dynasty, and his most famous loss against the Volga Bulghars soon after his victory on the Volga River. Here, we will provide an introduction to the Volga Bulghars, their battle against Subutai, the transformation this event has taken in some literature, and suggest why the defeat of one of history's greatest commanders is so little known. Subutai's encounter with the Volga Bulghars occurred in late 1223 or early 1224, while his forces marched east from their victory over the Rus and Kuman Kipchaks on the Khalkha. Taking into account the possible death of Zimonyi and losses incurred from years on campaign, the army returning to Mongolia was not operating in its best shape. Even if Zev survived the Volga River, the sources indicate that he died before they returned. For this video, we will assume Zev was dead by the time of the engagement, but the possibility of his presence is noted. Whether Subutai thought the Volga Bulghars an easy target to hit on the way home, or was unexpectedly ambushed while passing through their territory as sometimes presented, Mongol and Bulgar forces clashed somewhere along the Volga River, often known as the Battle of Samara Bend. First, let us provide a history of the Volga Bulghars and their relationship to the Bulgars of the Danube. For this, we must go back to the 5th and 6th centuries after the advance of mighty Attila, when the name Bulgar appears alongside a slew of other Turkic tribes in Byzantine sources. In the 7th century, a number of these tribes were united under the Bulgar Khan Huvrat, a brief union often called Old Great Bulgaria. Huvrat died around 660, and in tradition, his sons took the tribes in different directions, possibly due to the arrival of the Khazars. The most famous son, Asparuk, took his group west to the Danube River, establishing the First Bulgarian Empire, where they soon assimilated, adopting Christianity and abandoning their Turkic language. Those who remained in the steppe came under the rule of the Khazar Khaganate, a poorly understood polity whose rulers practiced Judaism. As the Khazars weakened over the 9th and 10th centuries, the Bulgars moved north to the Volga and Kama rivers, possibly displaced by the Pechenegs in the 890s. Soon after, a Bulgar state emerged along the Volga. By 922, the Bulgar rulers converted to Islam, likely to gain influence with Central Asian Muslim merchants. Their cities grew rapidly, promoted by the construction of mosques and wealth from trade. The peoples of the Siberian forest, like the Finno-Ugric peoples the Bulgars ruled, provided furs, wax, and honey prized across the Islamic world. Taking control of the Volga and the Kama, the routes by which these goods were transported, the Bulgars dominated the collection of the northern fur trade, growing rich as the Khazars disintegrated over the 10th century. By the mid-12th century, the expansion of the Rus Principalities, particularly Vladimir Suzdal, brought competition for control of the Volga trade. For example, in 1218, the Prince of Vladimir, Yuri II, devastated a swath of Bulgar country, destroying the towns of Oshel and constructing the Nizhny Novgorod to challenge Bulgar rule. The Bulgars' trade routes were also uprooted by the great displacement of people and annihilation of Horsemen with the Mongol western advance. The Bulgars' contacts with the Kuman Kipchak alerted them to the Mongols, and, perhaps learning their tactics, the Bulgars made their preparations. When Subutai's horde entered Bulgar territory, their armies were ready. That campaign against the Bulgars is mentioned in brief in a few sources, but only the Arab writer Ibn al-Athir provides any details. In al-Athir's account, in the forests of the Middle Volga, the Bulgars hit the marching Mongols in ambushes and drew them into feigned retreats. Once drawn out, the Bulgars would then strike the Mongols in the rear, and it seems a considerable number were lost. Ibn al-Athir describes only 4,000 escaping to flee east. Our pro-Mongolian imperial sources say next to nothing on this entire campaign, the secret history of the Mongols simply stating, Subutai Ba'atar had been put in a difficult situation by these people. Al-Athir then has the Mongols going to Zaksin, then ruled by the Kipchak, implying perhaps an exaggeration of the loss. But it was a loss nonetheless. Subutai met with Juche in modern Kazakhstan, according to the Yuanxi, perhaps taking part in the subjugation of local Kipchak kingly, before returning to Chinggis Khan in Mongolia around 1225. Despite these troubles, Subutai's army undertook a phenomenal circuit of Asia, unrepeated in military history. That the Mongols returned faithfully to their Khan after suffering setbacks thousands of kilometers away is testament to the loyalty of his generals. Though there is argument against the campaign's purpose being for reconnaissance, it did provide the Mongols with considerable information. The Rus, Kipchak Cumans, and Volga Bulghars showed themselves staunch enemies, and the wide-ranging influence of the Kipchak Cumans seemed a potential threat to the Mongols' western border. In the following years, expeditions were sent against the Bulghars, taking some of their territory, but the conquest of these peoples would come only in the later 1230s with overwhelming force, a campaign which brought them deep into Europe. But that is a matter we will discuss much later. While most historians agree on the outcome of the Mongol-Bulgar encounter, authors of more popular works have added details. John Mann, for example, placing Juche in the battle, but that is contradicted by the Chinese sources, which indicate that they met up further east. James Chambers, in The Devil's Horsemen, states that the Mongols defeated the Bulgars, but since they moved on, the Bulgars pretended that they had beaten the Mongols, and from there, the story spread as Bulgar propaganda. While Chambers provides a bibliography, he does not cite nor explain his source for this claim, and I suspect it comes in part from not wanting to see Subutai as being defeated. In Frank McLean's biography of Chinggis Khan, the Mongols were defeated on the Volga, but it was only an ambush on the Mongol vanguard, and the Mongols brought the main army to destroy Bulgar forces on the Kama River, but which is not supported by Ibn al-Athir or other medieval sources. Unlike Chambers, though, McLean provides citations, and tracking down his sources, I believe I have an explanation for the depiction of Mongol victories here. McLean cites, alongside Chambers, Dosin and Grousset for what he believes to be the correct interpretation. Abraham Dosin and René Grousset were influential French authors who wrote popular monographs on the Mongols that impacted scholarship for generations. However, they wrote without access to a number of sources, making readable narratives rather than thorough historical analysis. While less used in academia today, writers of popular histories for wider audiences make greater use of them. In Dosin's work, he describes the Mongols drawing the Bulgars into an ambush and destroying them, outright presenting a victory but not specifying if the engagement was on the Volga or the Kama rivers. I can't say from which source Dosin got his information for this statement, but a poor translation, misinterpretation, or just seeing the Bulgars listed among other conquered peoples may have led him to write this. Dosin may not have used Ibn al-Athir, and without him, one could be forgiven, in absence of a detailed account, for assuming the Mongols were victorious against a group already weakened by conflict with the Rus. Grousset's work, written a century later, provides a single line to the event, simply stating that Zev and Subutai went to beat the Bulgarians of Kama. The Kama River, to reiterate, connected to the Volga in the heart of Bulgar territory, though the Volga is standard to identify them by. To state that the Mongols went to the Bulgarians of the Kama, without any details, after describing the Kalka River battle, could appear to reference a Mongol victory on the Kama, especially alongside Dosin's work. To a non-specialist, there may not have been any apparent reason to doubt the words of Dosin and Grousset, who, as I have said, were highly regarded. But McLean was aware of Ibn al-Athir's account, and trying to make sense of the literature, and influenced perhaps by Chambers' statements of Bulgar propaganda, I believe Macklin tried to harmonize these accounts into a single narrative rather than declare one to be wrong, not questioning the sources or argument of Dosin, Grousset, or Chambers, but not wanting to disavow the depiction of a Mongol defeat. Macklin ended up creating a new account, a Mongol defeat on the Volga, followed by a Mongol victory on the Kama. What I want to show by this is that historians can make mistakes when they aren't careful. Secondary sources can summarize or rewrite events and unintentionally distort the presentation of primary sources. The primary chronicles must be continuously consulted and reanalyzed to ensure that secondary writers haven't added details which, through repetition, become taken as truth to many. The most effective historian knows how to skillfully make use of both sources and keep an eye out for later anachronism. Of final note is why this battle is so unknown compared to other defeats like Parwan and Ayn Jalut. There are a few possible reasons. Strategically, this battle was of little importance, inconsequential considering the Mongols returned and destroyed the Bulgar state. Ibn al-Athir, our main source for this battle, is less utilized for the history of the Mongol conquests than, say, Juvayni, who does not discuss Zev and Subutai beyond the Caucasus, and Rashid al-Din, who provides only a mention of the Bulgars as a target of the Mongols. And I believe to an extent, some don't want to think the Mongols, especially Subutai, suffered any defeats. Some discussions of the Mongol army verge on the hysterical, presenting the Mongols as a force of nature winning battles entirely through their bows, instead of humans who used a variety of tactics, strategies, and subject peoples to overcome enemies suffering from internal weaknesses or fragmentation. Subutai, despite his fame, is not well studied like Napoleon or Caesar. The details of his career beyond the Volga River and Mohi are not well known outside of specialists, and many wouldn't know where to even look to counter a claim that he was undefeated. Subutai was a phenomenal general to be sure, but he was just a man in extraordinary circumstances. When we return to the Mongol conquest of the Jin dynasty, we will even see in detail his defeats at the hands of the Jurchen, perhaps the final military success of that once mighty empire. The Volga Bulghars used good planning against an overextended and weary enemy, winning a battle, but not a war. Next time, we will talk about something I haven't decided on yet, but statistically speaking, it will probably be related to the Mongol Empire.